Hello there, and a very warm welcome to another video from Change Tips and Tools. Today's video we will look at resource capacity planning with me, Phil, the Brummie that hails from Birmingham, England. Now, the purpose of today's video is to talk about the why behind capacity planning and then show you how this template works. As I'm a firm believer that knowing the why and the objective behind something will help as I show you how to build this template from scratch for yourself. Now, resource capacity planning in project management is the process of determining the number of resources you're expected to require to meet the project needs. In other words, it's about forecasting the gap between available resources and the required ones, i.e. capacity versus demand. In fact, if capacity is done well, it will ensure that the breadth, depth, caliber and team skills are appropriate for all activities, that the morale, motivation and energy and the collaboration across teams are high, and it will enable you to create an environment and logistics to support a productive and effective team culture, and also that roles and responsibilities across the team are always clear, and that resources are not over allocated as a constant, but instead are utilised appropriately. Without appropriate capacity planning, whether you're a project manager or even a department head or team lead, it is, in my experience, a major contributor to failure and indeed high staff turnover. My favourite saying, after all, is fail to plan and you plan to fail. Now, the Excel template has been designed to support resource capacity planning, and all of the following have been used to build the template that I'm about to give you an in-depth demonstration of. And I will show you in the next set of videos, step by step, how to build it for yourself, leveraging all these capabilities. So, without further ado, let's jump into the demonstration. Let's do this. So, first things first, because this is taking up a little bit too much space, let's get rid of this ribbon. So I'm going to do the drop down arrow over here, and I'm going to enter full screen mode like so. There you go, so I can see more of the template. Now, just so you're aware, if I hit these three dots, I can then change that to be always there, or I can change it to be show tabs only. And again, if I hit one of these, go into design, then I can change the setting again. So I'm going to go to full screen mode so we can see more of the template like so. So this is the summary tab, or the resource summary. Now, this is where you can review the status on demand versus capacity based on the demand and team capacity data you have entered into this template. So let's look at the header first. So, obvious title, resource summary. This is showing you the date range that we've entered into the static data that this template covers. So this covers a date from the 1st of January 24 to the 31st of December 24. So that's what that information is. Then you can see some high level information reference how many programs you've allocated resources to, how many projects you've allocated resources to, and also how many of your named resources you have allocated to projects from your entire team, i.e. named resources. It does not include generic resources. Now, generic resources are where you create a role placeholder where you know you've got demand and you can plot it out within your resource demand. So you can then look at it. So these are named resources that have been allocated from a total of 7 named resources within my team. Now, when we look at the top, let's go across the top here. So here we can see the total demand versus capacity in hours and cost. Then if we look to the right of that, we can see performance against utilization targets for the team. You can also see a breakdown by skill set as far as utilization, and that's for the entirety of this date range here. Then we have charts that show demand versus supply in hours, and also for costs by months of the year. And if I scroll down, we can then see that we have resource availability in hours, and this is net the demand by month, or the demand from projects that we've allocated. And then finally, we have resource utilization versus target by month. Now, all this is completely dynamic. So if I select architect, the chart has refreshed. So straight away, I can see that we're over allocated here based on this against total capacity. But the utilization is saying we're underutilized. If I look at these demand versus capacity in hours, I can see that there's no demand against the resource from August onwards, but we do have over allocation in April, May and June, and this seems to be supported by the resource availability and also based on the utilization, where we can see that up to 133% utilized in April. So we can see there is a problem there. Again, if I select project management or project manager skill set, what this is telling me is that we have over allocation, yet my utilization is 0. So again, if I look down here, we can see that we've got some problems with capacity issues, and also I can see that there's no actual utilization here. So that's telling me that we have generic resources allocated, and we need to allocate some named resources against that demand. So if I take the filter off there, so that's the summary tab. Now let's look at let's look at the data and the way that we enter the data to set this template up. So the first thing that you're going to have to do, and again, if I these are hyperlinks to anywhere within the template. So if I click static data, which is the first thing that we've got to enter, is that we can see we have categories. So these categories can be related to your portfolio. So for example, here we've got mandatory, regulatory, down to discretionary, but you can create your own business as usual categories as well. We've also got programs, so you can have up to 20 programs, and also here you can see you can have up to 10 categories. So we can have up to 20 programs, and we can have up to 50 projects here in the projects table. Then over here is the cross-reference table, and this is how we create the relationship between these 3 tables. So based on the program, what projects are related to that program and what category do they fall under here. So that's the cross-reference table. Then moving over to the right, we have our resource static data. So this is where we define our skill sets, and we can have up to 10 skill sets. As far as the type of leave, this is based on when you're assigning leave to resources against their capacity. So you've got planned leave and unplanned leave. You can't add any more to this, so you can only have 2 types here. And then here you can see the planning period. So what period does this resource capacity planner cover? So here it's from the 1st of January 24 to the 31st of December 2024. And you can define this yourself and recalculate it, and the whole thing is dynamic. Then finally, on the static data, this is where you define your national holidays. So here in the UK, we call them bank holidays. So I've put all the bank holidays in here. And again, that impacts overall capacity of your resources. So that's static data. The next, you need to define your resources. So if I go to the resources tab, so here you can have up to 100 resources here within this table. Obviously you define a resource name. If it's a generic resource, you just define the role. Now you have to have unique values in here. So for example, if I typed PMO again in here, it would tell me that it's a duplication and I can't have it. So if I just delete that, you then define what skill set that role or that resource belongs to, and then you state whether they are generic or a named resources here, and then you set their hourly cost. So you've got an idea based on what's the cost of my total capacity versus the total cost of my demand, i.e. what am I going to recoup of that cost to run my department or run my change team. So that's a resource data. Then once you've done that and defined all those things, you are then ready to start planning your capacity. So the next thing you'll do is your resource capacity. So I can select the tab here, or again, I can select the button up here. And on the resource capacity here is that you define the working pattern of the resources. And your start and finish date is how long are they allocated to your program or project, or how long are they with your organization. So within here, you set what their name is. So you select them from the drop down, and you can only do it once. So if I go to here, at the moment, you can see I've not set Eddie's working pattern in here yet. So I just do escape there. So you set the start and finish date, and then you set their hours in the week against the days of the week. So I've set that against these resources. And then finally, on the resource capacity, you can set planned or unplanned leave here between some date ranges. And again, that will impact the capacity and be considered. So that's your resource capacity. Once you've defined that, you can then start allocating, put my teeth back in, you can start allocating your resources to those programs. So again, with a program, you select the program, and it will show you those projects that are related to that particular program. So it will only show you those projects that are related to the program. So if I just escape out of that, and I just delete that. So those are the data that you have to set up. Now, other than the summary tab, you've then got a number of tabs that you can use to analyze the data in a bit more detail. So first of all, you can look at your capacity tab. So this shows you the overall capacity by skill set. And with all the pivot tables, from capacity to utilization, you can right click on these, select expand or collapse. So if I expand the entire field, I can drill down to by week. So this is by year, by month, and by week. And then I can also likewise I shrink down an individual one, or I can right click on that and do collapse entire field, and it'll collapse all of them. I can also look at specific date ranges, so I can look at by month, so look at 3 months, or I can just drag and drop it like so. So let's remove the filter on that. And again, you can look at specific resources here as well. Now, one of the things that's showing me here is that these slicers highlight the resources that are making up the data within your pivot table. And one thing that I've noticed is that Eddie is not there. He's not highlighted. So Eddie's capacity looks to have not been set yet on his working pattern. Yeah. And we'll show an impact of what that does going forwards if you don't set the working pattern. So then if I go to my demand tab, so this is where you can look at where the demand is coming from. And again, you've got more filter options where you can drill into the information. So I can look at, just name resources. So I've only got 2 people, remember, allocated, which is Mary and Bill. Or I can look at generic resources, and I can see that I've got some generic resources allocated here as well. And again, I can remove that, and I can look at it by program, by project, and also by category if I wish, and look at where the demand is coming from. Next, if I go down here, I can select the availability. So this shows the availability of resources. So obviously anything that is generic, it doesn't have any capacity, so therefore it's going to show a negative. But I can also see against Mary that I've got some over allocation between April and June. And then finally, another lens to look at this is utilization. And again, I want to look at resources and see if they're achieving that utilization target, but also make sure they're not being over allocated as well here. And again, Mary is achieving the utilization target, but again, over allocated, and again, it's ragging it accordingly. So those are all the tabs. So let's enter some information in here. So one of the things that we noticed in the demand is that if I look at generic resources, I can see I've allocated some resources here, or some demand against a PMO resource, against project 1. I can also see I've got some PM requirements against project 1, and also some PM requirements against project 6. So, and again, if I go back to my utilization here, I can see that against the PMO, there's Phil Bourne. He's definitely a lazy one. But you can see that he's not actually allocated to anything. And also Jane Smith is not allocated. And also it's showing me that Eddie's not allocated. Now remember, when we was looking at Eddie in the capacity, it was showing there was no data against Eddie. So watch what happens when we allocate those resources. So if I go to resource demand, and let's look at this first PM role against project 6. Let's allocate Eddie. So it only shows me those resources that are project managers. So let's choose Eddie. And then if I choose Jane for the second PM role, then if I look at the PMO role, you'll notice it only shows you those people that are PMO resources or skill sets. So I'm going to choose Phil. Then what I'm going to do there is I'm going to, over on the top right, now that I've made those data changes, is I'm going to hit refresh data. And there you go, it's done. So let's go back to the availability. So we can see that Jane has now been allocated. Some of her allocations gone down. If I look at the utilization, I can see I'm still not particularly meeting my utilization targets, as in Phil. But Jane's doing better. They're now hitting 75%, and then it drops off. So we need to find some more work in July for Jane. But Eddie's still showing red here. And if you remember rightly here, if I go to capacity here, Eddie's not showing. So if I do Eddie as far as his capacity, there's no capacity for Eddie. So let's go to resource capacity. And if I do the drop down in this table, you can see that in the drop down, there's only Eddie available. So it only shows those resources from your resource list that you have not plotted a working pattern for, i.e. capacity. So let me do this for Eddie. So Eddie, let's do it from these dates. In fact, I'm going to copy this one down like so. And again, I'm going to refresh the data. And there you go. If I click OK, let's go back to capacity. And there you go. Eddie's now got some capacity there. So if I just remove that filter like so, if I look at my demand, and again, let's just clear that filter because I've got no generic resources allocated. We can see that we've allocated Eddie, we've allocated Jane. If I look at availability, it's looking better, but Mary's not looking good. So let's look at the resource demand there. So let's look at Mary's working pattern. So Mary there has got 7.5 hours there, and if I go to resource demand, and I can see that if I look at that, Mary's allocated twice there. Right, so on program A, Mary has been allocated, over allocated against the same project there, look. And let's take this one here and let's put it against the generic resource like so. And then if I then refresh data, and I look at availability, we can now see that the architect is over allocated because it's a generic resource, so I need to find another architect. But I can see now Mary is fine there like so. If I go to my utilization, that's looking slightly better for Mary. Again, Phil, we need to find some more work for Phil. So if I then go to my summary, as you can see, we need to create more allocations going across. If I look at my architect, I know I've got some over allocation there. So again, if I just do Mary, I can see I'm fine. That's where I've got a problem, is against this particular architect because there's no capacity for that. So I need to find a resource. And that's one way of using this. Now, if I wanted to add another resource, another skill set, so say for example, we're thinking about data, I want a data resource. And I've got a data resource that's joining the team. So if I go to my static data, first of all, I'm going to create data as a skill set. I'm then going to go to my resource sheet and I'm going to create myself another resource called resource. It's going to be called Ronnie Sullivan, the goat of snooker, was retired and now he's picked up some work in data. He's not a generic resource, but it's quite expensive, so I'm going to £95 an hour, like so. So there we've got Ronnie is added to that. I'm then going to go to resource capacity. So again, if I do the drop down, it should only show Ronnie. And again, I'm just going to copy this from here all the way down, so I don't have to type it in like so. But the other thing is Ronnie is going to be on vacant, so I can start typing Ronnie and it'll find him. So if I select that, so let's go from 02, from 2nd of Feb to the 10th of March, Ronnie is on a long vacation. Let's do 8 hours a day, and there you go. I'm then going to go to resource demand, and let's say I've put a demand against program C, against those projects, so it's only pulling up those projects that belong to program C. So let's go 12, and let's do it from 02/02/24, so 2nd of Feb. And again, if I highlight these cells here, so Monday to Friday, type 8 and type 8, and then do Control Enter. It will enter that same value across the area that I've selected, and then just make these 0, 0, and let's do this to the 31st of July 24. It's going to be data. So there's data. It should only find Ronnie. There it is. There you go. So let's refresh the data. There you go. It's done. Let's go to the summary tab. Let's look at data and see what that's done. And what you can see now is that as far as availability, there's no availability there in April onwards because Ronnie's fully utilised there. but you can see it's causing us a problem because of his vacation. So if I go to my resource capacity, and you can see that Ronnie is on holiday until the 10th of March. So what I'm going to do is go to the demand, and let's start Ronnie on that project the day after. And again, refresh that data. And again, if I go to the summary, you can see now that we no longer have any problems. So what I need to do now is use this template to allocate my resources and make sure that they are being utilized appropriately across the year. Let me just go and do that. And there you go. I've now looked at all my resourcing, spoken to a number of programs and projects, and I'm happy with my allocation. I can see over here that everybody's achieving the utilization targets except for architect. If I look at that, I'm not that worried. It's 74%, so I'm fine with that. Just looking at the allocation, looking through each one, I'm happy with the way that resources have been allocated. Wonderful. And there you go. So hopefully you found that demonstration informative. It shows you what the template is, you understand what resource capacity planning is, and more importantly, how critical it is to the success of any team, the morale and your ability to achieve objectives. So if you did find that informative, please remember to click that like, subscribe, and hit that notifications button for future content. I wish you a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. So please take care, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video where I start to show you how to build this template yourself. Step-by-step guide on how to build this using Excel tables, Power Pivot and Power Query. So look after yourself. Until the next time we meet, bye bye now.